right. So I will call to order this meeting of the Community Preservation Committee at 5:32 PM, March 28th, 2024. As you may have just heard, the CPC is recording this meeting, and if anyone else is recording, you're required to let me know. Hearing none. So we will do our roll call since we are not all here in person. For attendance, Susan,
Here.
Wisty,
Here.
Donna,
Here.
Garth,
Here.
David,
Here.
Amy,
Here.
and Travis. I am here, so we are all here. Definitely a quorum. All right, so on our agenda, we have a public comment period. So just before we get into that, I will just remind everyone that tonight we are hoping to be voting on which projects get recommended for funding for Community Preservation Act funding. So if you have any public comments about which projects you want to see funded, which ones you don't want to see funded, which ones you want to see partially funded, anything like that, now would be the time. So I will start with people in person, and then I'll look online and then look again.
The things
Oh,
that are
yeah.
on the table.
Kristen, do you have a list you could maybe share on the screen just to make it easier?
Of all the projects.
Yeah, just like a project list. I did think about that, sharing a list, and then I forgot to ask.
Main list with requests.
Yeah,
Requested
so
amounts.
before we get into the public comments, just to go over which projects there actually are. So we have there's about $300,000 available in CPA funding, and we have the projects that you see on the screen here. There's City Clerk bookbinding project, Garden Theater facade, 278 Main Street cornice repair. Those are all the historic projects. And then for housing, there's a downtown housing pre-development project, Oxbow Design, Build Co-op is another housing project, and Habitat for Humanity. And then for recreation, there's pickleball, bike racks in parks, hillside park improvements, site amenities that are throughout the city, and trail wayfinding at on Rocky Mountain Ridge in various parcels. So those are the projects, and in column C there is the amount that was requested for each project, and there's $300,000 in CPA funding available this funding cycle.
Did the co-op
Oh,
remove theirs?
Yeah, we'll get to that, but yeah, the
Okay.
front application, they sent me some communication so I can relay the details after.
yeah. So I guess we'll get into that, but it sounded like the co-op may have, they had withdrawn their.
Changing.
All right, so I will open it up to public comments in person. If anyone has a public, usually we have a chair.
Oh, get fancy.
Oh, yeah, just so that the microphone can pick it up. If anyone wants to make a public comment, you can come up to the chair and
I'll come up. I'm going first.
all right, go ahead.
Pretty much a brief soul.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Melissa Webb and I live here in Greenfield. I'm actually an abutting neighbor to Hillside Park. Hillside Park is definitely a very community oriented. It brings a lot of people together from the community. A lot of people who are currently displaced in housing use that park because that's one of the closer parks to them. We have the splash pad, which I can't even thank Christy enough for that. But the issue is there's no shade. The shade is super lacking over there. If you go over there, you'll notice trees have tried to be planted unsuccessfully because it literally is a lake. And it's just a really nice facility that gets lots of use. It also gets used a lot by some of our lower income folks. And we also have down the street is an elderly complex. So we have a lot of people. Elm Terrace is down there. So a lot of people do come down there and walk. but the wood chips tend to overflow where the walkway is around the park. And it's just not as, I don't know, it's not really a safe walking place for older people. And I know we don't really have a good handicapped accessible walkway is what I want to suggest in Greenfield for people to utilize. So, and again, the changes I've seen, I've now lived there 12 years. And the changes over time at Hillside have been dramatic. They really, Christy and her team, as well as the community, kids get off the bus and they run over there to play. We have the Summer Eats program in the summer that comes over to Hillside Park, which we get a lot of out-of-town families. A lot of people use it as like a stopping point too. You know, I've caught people there during the pandemic who were just like meeting each other, you know, because it was an outdoor safe space to cohabitate. So for me, Hillside Park is definitely on the top. I see a lot of benefits and I see it benefiting a very large span of people. So that's my little,
With the heat, the kids must be using the splash pad like crazy, huh?
the splash pad gets used a lot. Like people will walk over, even who live on like School Street, they like walk over with wagons sometimes. Noms comes over. I've seen the girls club walk over using that, especially in the summertime. And in the morning, it's great. There's a ton of shade. There's a lot of trees from the Conway Street houses. But once it hits like 10, 11 o'clock, the shade just isn't there. I mean, there is a porta potty that comes in, which is great, but that also, in my opinion, isn't enough. I'd love to see a bath or, you know, compostable toilets there too, which I know is like millions of miles out, but it's definitely gets a lot of traffic and a lot of use in positive, more positive than negative, I would say. But the shade's definitely one of the biggest concerns. And a lot of people do talk about it like, there's no shade over here. There's no this. But again, I've seen so many changes positive over there. This would just be another way to improve that area. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do we have anyone else in person? All right, come on up.
My name is Sydney Moore, and I'm here on behalf of my sister who frequents the Hillside Park, and she wanted me to just kind of add on to what Melissa said about adding more shading. Personally, I know that after like 10 or 11, it's entirely too sunny for myself. I have to put on sunblock every 20 minutes just to like hang out there. And I would spend a lot more time there if there was adequate shading. And my sister has kids and I love to hang out with them there, but you know, I'd have to wait until the late afternoons when the sun starts to go down or has shifted. So yeah, I'd just love to see more shading there.
All right, thank you, thank you. Else in person? Okay, we will go to Zoom if there's anyone online who would like to make a public comment. You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself. Not seeing anyone. Like no public comments on Zoom. Or if you're having trouble, write something in chat to let us know, but assume none in person left, so. All right, so that was our public comment period. Thanks for everyone who gave us a comment. And so next we have approval of minutes. These are the minutes from March 21st, 2024.
I move to accept the minutes as written.
Second. Okay, we have a motion to accept as written, seconded. Any other discussion on the minutes?
I sort of friendly amendment. I don't think I saw my disclosure in there.
Put that in there.
Um,
Just looking
When I read through it, it was on like the preview version on my Yahoo, so
Mhm.
it just didn't show up, but
Yeah, I don't see Garth.
Yeah,
No, it was in my notes, but I guess it didn't.
yeah,
it didn't transcribe over.
okay, so, yeah, so we just need to add
Yeah, I think I
Uh,
same disclosure as
the
as Wisty.
the co-op.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. I assume everyone's fine with adding that. Okay. All right, any other discussion on the minutes? All right, we will vote on approving the minutes with that amendment. Susan,
Yes.
Garth,
Yes.
Wisty,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
I am a yes, so that is unanimous. Okay, so new business. Review and vote on fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Act project recommendations. It sounds like maybe you want to talk about an update real quick before we do that.
Yeah, so we have one major update from an applicant. The Franklin Community Co-op had obviously requested 200,000 for the restoration of their historic facade. I received some communication from them this afternoon. They've withdrawn their application. I can read the email that their communications manager sent me, and then I can also follow up just a little bit because I had some verbal conversations as well. Their communications manager says, John Williams asked me to reach out to you to let you know that because our timeline is still not set in stone, we would prefer to pass on this round of CPC funding so that another organization for which this money could have a larger impact or a large impact might have a higher chance of being funded. We very much appreciate the difficult work you and the committee do to make the tough decisions around funding distribution. I know it isn't easy. We look forward to applying again when we're ready. So I think the rationale that they're kind of using here is they're kind of all the applicants this year, they're kind of at the tail end of when all these projects would get done. And so whether they receive the funding this year or next year, it wouldn't make as big of a difference as it might for one of these other projects that's applying for funding. So seems like they're kind of stepping out of the way to let someone else apply. And then they said that they would probably be back in a future year to apply for funding. So they're no longer one to consider for this year after that.
Okay, great. Assuming that's the only project update that we have.
Yeah, that's the only major project update. After the previous meeting, I followed up with all of the applicants on the conditions that you were going to require for them. And I was able to be in touch pretty much in some way with all of them except for the Oxbow project. But I double checked, there's the condition around construction, and they had put in their application that it definitely would be starting within 2 years. So I think I'm assuming that it's fine with them. I can just run through these super quickly. City clerk is obviously already all good. I worked that out directly with them a while ago. Co-op is a moot point. Garden block, I was in touch with Isaac Mass. There's some nuances to work out with exactly what kind of preservation restriction to implement if he receives funding, but all that's listed there obviously is the preservation restriction itself, which he seems to be okay with. So figuring out the length of time and what it kind of covers, we can figure out at a later date, but the restriction itself is okay with him. Tim Grader's Cornice project, again, figuring out the details of exactly what kind of restriction. Obviously, a lot of this depends on how much funding you give. It could vary. But again, the restriction itself is okay with him. The downtown housing project, I know at the previous meeting, Alyssa and Alyssa had a little bit of a conversation about what kind of conditions to place on that one. I worked with Alyssa and Tim directly on that one and kind of reworded those and removed some of the conditions that would have made it prohibitive for them to do pre-development work. So at this point, the 3 conditions for that project are the general one about just following the grant agreement, a general one about using funding for support of community housing via pre-development that works towards creating affordable housing. And the third and most important one that we absolutely did have to keep was when the project is finished, they need to execute an affordable housing restriction that's ensuring the public benefit of the project. So that one is all set as well. Oxbow, like I said, I was not able to get in touch with them, but I think these would be okay. I was in touch with the Habitat Project, and the only thing that they requested to remove is the project funding sources requirement. Originally, you could see right there, the disbursement of the funds was tied to having all their funding sources in order. It seems like for Habitat's project, it's kind of an ongoing thing. They'll get started as they're continuing to make sure the funding is lined up. So removing that there makes it easier for the project to receive CPA funding. I think we should remove that if all of you agree. And then just to be consistent, I think removing that from the Oxbow project. Like I said, I wasn't able to be in touch with them. For all we know, he might be still doing the same thing, getting funding implemented as the project starts getting going. So removing that would be consistent there. And then we've had Christy at all of our recreation meetings. All of hers are just the general following the Community Preservation Act grant agreement condition. And then one special one for the site amenities, just like last year, where the amenities can only be placed on recreation department controlled property. So all those should be good to go. Obviously, as you go along, and if you're doing any kind of partial funding and you're thinking, I want to fund this part of the project, you can add that as a condition. But these general ones should be good to go.
Great, thanks. Okay, so what I had in mind here was maybe first looking at we each did our individual, how much money we would give to each project. And then Christian put that together, and it's a little messier than it was last year, but that's okay. And maybe we could take a look at that and see where we agree, where we maybe don't agree as much. And then I think, maybe just have kind of like a general discussion about, the overall look of it. And then, the ones that the way we did it last year was the ones that were unanimous or near unanimous. We decided to go ahead and vote on those first, to kind of get them out of the way, and then work our way from there. So,
Yeah, I do have the suggested way to do motions for projects like last year. So this is like a template. If you just want to, there's a copy for everyone to take one and pass it. Obviously, some of these might be funded from both the general fund or the flexible CPA fund and the category reserve. So there's a motion for that if you're funding it from two spots.
so Christian, do you want to kind of walk us through this a little bit? Like,
Sure.
What are the numbers in the front column?
Okay, so the numbers in the front column are how many people agreed to fund it in general. So I received 6 of you got back to me with how you would disperse the funding if you had sole discretionary power. And so you can see the ones that are in yellow, all 6 of you agreed that it should receive funding. And then there's 2 of them where everyone agreed that it should receive full funding, which are the Habitat Project and the Bike Racks Project. So I slotted those in on the chart already, since it seems like all of you agreed. And then the other 2 where everyone agreed they should receive funding, but it's kind of varies on what level of funding they should receive. That is the Hillside Park Improvements Project, and then the Greater Downtown Housing Project. And then from there, the numbers go down. So 5 out of 6 people agreed, 3 out of 6, and so forth.
Donna, you had a question?
Yes, my question is, why is the unanimous funding sources in flexible as opposed to recreation or housing?
I just stuck it there. You could completely decide anywhere else if you'd like. You could put in either of the category reserves if you want to.
Yeah, I think last year we used the specific funding first and then the flexible. So if we did vote on those 2, I would recommend we do, the housing one from housing and the recreation one from recreation. And then keep going with housing and recreation until there isn't anymore, and then use flexible.
I move to recommend 15,000 from the housing reserve for the Habitat for Humanity project.
Second.
And there's the
And I ask a question?
Yeah. So we have a motion to recommend the funding that was seconded and now discussion.
Do we have a holistic discussion or are we just do this whole thing piecemeal, random?
It's hard. So, I mean, I think what we did last year was the ones where we all agreed, we voted and kind of like got those out of the way. And then it's a more general discussion on how are we going to deal with what's left. And last year, I think it was a little easier because I think there were more that everyone, it was like unanimous. So then there was less to talk about after that. So
Okay.
if you'd rather have a more general discussion first.
I mean, I don't want to derail things, but I do have two suggestions for maybe the next time
Sure.
one does this.
Yeah.
One is that I think there should be a holistic discussion about it and then kind of come to some sort of agreement that you then vote on
Mhm.
instead of a zillion motions and stuff. And also, I think that I don't know if this committee is allowed to have something like an executive session, but I think having like a full and frank discussion with applicants, people on Zoom, people in the room is actually not good for a discussion.
Mm.
The reason being like, for example, let's say I, gave a blistering review of some applicant and then somebody informed me like, oh, you're not seeing this aspect or that aspect, and I want to change my mind. I wouldn't necessarily want to have that sort of, negative commentary about people's suggestions that, maybe it will get refined through discussion, recorded with that is kind of, you can't really have a good discussion, I feel, in this sort of environment. So it's just, I don't know if that's possible, but that would be another suggestion I would make.
Yeah, as far as I know, that's not a reason to enter executive session. And the executive session there's a few very specific reasons, and that's not really close to any of them, is to talk about personnel issues and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You would not do
Okay.
something like that in executive session.
Yeah, I think it's the public has a right to know what we're basing our decisions on.
I was in that's open meeting law,
Yeah.
training this Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You just had the training.
I just had the training and it would not be acceptable to do that. If we could have, matter of fact, yeah, in general, to the executive session.
I mean, we do have to vote on, we do have to have like motions and vote on each one individually, just to finalize our chart. But we certainly could have like a holistic discussion about like, in general, how are people feeling about the thing? Like, oh, I really feel like, there's too many recreations, or there's, the
Yeah.
housing is too expensive, or,
Yeah.
I know our plan says housing, but I really think this year we should do more with the historic, or, whatever it is, we can certainly have that sort of discussion.
Yeah, and I think we definitely could have that like before we vote on anything.
Mhm.
Or, I mean, in my view, if there are ones that were unanimous, like, why not just do those and then have that discussion? Either way.
You're voting on amounts.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. But we all unanimously agreed on those, but our views could have changed,
There's a difference.
details have changed.
The amounts, right? For the sixes?
Two of them, everyone said they give the full amount, the 3,900 to the bike racks, and then the 15,000 to Habitat. Everyone said to do those exact amounts across the board.
Yeah,
Well, then that does make sense.
so that's what I wasn't trying to,
Yeah,
I guess I just didn't say that clearly enough.
I understand that.
Yes.
Like solid question.
Yeah, okay, so Christian, so we made the motion. How do we need to list the condition? Do we just need to?
You can just read them all.
Okay.
So Garth made the motion. Do you want to also read the list of conditions for Habitat? Obviously,
So the CPA funds would be used for the creation of affordable housing to 100% area median income. No disbursement of the funds may occur until the project has received all necessary permitting and approvals. Disbursement of Disbursement funds will begin only after construction. Construction of the project must begin within 2 years of the grant award approval by city council. Grantee agrees to execute and record an affordable housing restriction on the property located at 184 Petty Plain Road. And grantee agrees to follow other conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act grant agreement.
Okay, so we have the motion, the full funding, 15,000 from housing for the Habitat for Humanity project with those conditions. Is there any other discussion on that before we vote? Everyone good with those conditions? Okay, so we will vote on that. Susan,
Yes.
Wisty,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
and I am a yes, so that is unanimous. Okay, so we will recommend city council fund that 15,000 Habitat for Humanity from housing.
I move to recommend $3,900 from the Recreation Reserve for the bike rack project developed by John McGee on the condition that the grantee agrees to follow conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act memorandum of agreement.
We have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, second by Garth. Any other discussion on that? Right, hearing none, we will vote on the $3,900 from recreation for bike racks with the condition as stated. Susan,
Yes.
Wisty? Yes. Donna,
yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy,
No.
and I'm a yes, so that motion passes. Okay. David, I think this is your general discussion time now. To try and figure out, oh, you put that under housing. So,
For the other 270,000,
yeah, another guy. So one thing I did one thing I put together was looking at what categories, like what percent of funding went to which category last year. So last year, we have said that housing is our highest priority in our plan. Last year, 0% went to open space, 30% went to housing, 14% went to historic, and 56% went to recreation. And so I have a spreadsheet here and I can update it with amounts and then I can see what this year's would be and then what cumulatively it would be over the 2 years too. If we want to think about it that way. Maybe he's already done it.
Yeah, it's not exactly precise, they count to the dollar, because this doesn't factor in when you guys spend admin, which is like $1,000, $2,000 a year. But yeah, once all the numbers are plugged in, you'll be able to see exactly what kind of percentages you've done over the last 2 years.
Great.
How could historic be under 10%?
This is including this is including all the 635,000 between the 2 years. So once all the numbers are plugged in, it'll be over 10%.
So last year,
that's not actually showing the FY 20.
Yeah, like right now, FY 24 is 0. And that's what it's factoring in right now. Once you start approving projects from historic, if I put numbers in up at the top of the spreadsheet here, that number would update and it
But
would.
I thought it was a required 10% funding for each of the categories.
no, last year, 14% went to historic.
Okay.
But what we've put in.
On there, it only shows 7 because that's a combined.
Well, because he's already added some for this year.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah.
Right, so that the percentage column is not useful info yet.
Okay. Not yet.
Thank you. Ignore that.
Right.
Ignore it for
Pay no attention to the percentages
The man behind the.
right in front of the curtain.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So I guess I just wanted to say, I think, we have those 2 housing projects. And we both rated those highly. I also did feel really strongly that at least the shade portion of Hillside Park should get funded. And I think, Christian, could you scroll over on the Hillside Park one? I think everyone either said at least the shade or shade plus trail or partial funding. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out to start the discussion, I guess.
Yeah, from my point of view, the shade, piece and trying to make the numbers work. Doing a partial funding of the other sections of the Hillside Park project didn't make sense to me in terms of their being actually able to complete the project, since there isn't anything, unless I'm mistaken, Christie, there is nothing in the capital budget. If we were to, let's say, give you 67,000 instead of 50,000, would that $17,000 be useful for the paths?
Obviously, whatever money we get, I would have to, see how far we could get, but I have zero capital for this project.
Right, that's what I thought. So part of my logic in saying the 50,000 is it's something that's there, it's in the budget, it could be completed. And so I thought, and it was obviously something needed. So in terms of the Hillside Park project, that's why I came up with the 50.
So Christian, I had an idea. Maybe like the ones that we've already voted on, can we maybe have those a different color?
Yeah, we did that last year.
And then as we can kind of like tentatively fill in some ideas and then kind of see how that shakes out.
Maybe, sort of looking at that, another way to do it, right, is we could go in and be like, I move to deny funding to Greenfield Pickleball.
Well, I don't think we need to vote to deny funding. I think we just,
No, you do.
oh, we do?
Yeah.
Because we have to vote for
Yeah.
each of them. So I'm wondering if we go from the top and we go from the bottom, and then obviously the messy middle is where there's
So what are the ones that we have on the bottom? There's Greenfield.
there's pickleball and the
One person that wanted to fund it.
Site amenities and trailway fund.
I don't know if we want any discussion on it. Like, I know we voted, I thought we'd actually voted to fund one of the courts, but I guess we were actually just funding
Like pre-development.
like pre-development or like
Site readiness.
site readiness for that. But so, yeah, so feasibility, which feels fuzzier than I had hoped, I guess. But I guess my thought on that one, and this isn't an attack on recreation, but I think there's definitely an issue if the town is saying, well, since recreation can maybe get stuff from CPA, we're not going to fund any recreation. And I realize recreation hasn't been funded for stuff for years, right? That's
a CPA thing. I think it's just a.
no, but I think, and now when you go to capital for stuff, they're like, well, you can get it from CPA, and that doesn't feel good.
But CPA is for recreation. That's one of the stated.
It's one of the stated things, and then, and we have a bunch of different stuff.
But it's also not supposed to supplant other, like.
Right, it feels like it should be an addition, or it should be like part of it, or it should be finishing stuff or kicking off, in that case, it's kicking off stuff. And we've had a number of pickleball people show up, and that's great. I think it's a cool thing. And I think they should really work on a constituency that really pushes council and capital. Much like the skate park, hopefully this won't take 15 years. And we can make it happen.
Yeah, I guess there is a comparison for me here with what happened with the skate park. And granted, it took us longer than I would have liked, but the fact is that people were very committed and they showed their commitment by doing small fundraisers over the course of the 11 years we spent working on this thing. And, you know, that was, there was this general agreement that we had to demonstrate that this was important to the skating community and for the city to really say, okay, this is a priority. And as much as I love people showing up in pickle costumes and all of that, I haven't seen that same kind of commitment. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to go to CPA, we're going to get money and we'll get money from capital, but not anything which says, yeah, we're going to raise some money and we're going to, you know, put that into the pot as part of the process. And, you know, at the last meeting, when Wisty asked about that, I thought there was a misunderstanding, at least, about what we were asking about. And I thought it was great that they were doing those fundraisers around pickleball, but it didn't help with the courts themselves. And so, so that's my hit on that.
Just as a point of clarification, how did we fund the skate park? Wasn't it grants?
So the skate park was funded from a park grant,
Mhm.
capital, fundraising, and a donation from,
ARPA.
no, well, an ARPA, but also a donation from a citizen who had passed away, who gave me money specifically for the skate park. And Travis, can I respond to Susan? Since the last meeting about pickleball, I have been in touch with a group of people that were here, and they now understand the request of working with me to move forward with fundraising. So that is in process.
Great,
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
For me, on the pickleball request, like putting the merits of it aside, the feasibility study, from what I've learned in our meetings, hasn't been conducted. So for me, doesn't make sense to put in a request for the full amount of a project or a large fraction of a project when you haven't completed a feasibility study. So that's why I think it's just not the right timing.
Yeah, and I think for me,
So to respond to that, David, is that it is in process. And you have to remember that like funding, if I'm gonna apply for a park grant, I need capital or CPC funding to get the match to apply to actually get the grant. So that's why the request is in. And the request amount is based on projects of similar size in our area. Just, you know, that's the number.
any other pickleball comments or? Yeah, go ahead.
So this is to Christie.
Okay, sure.
So Christie, are you aware of any kind of grants that this would fall under that, you know, come within the park
We
category?
can apply for a park grant, but in order to apply for a park grant, I need to have a matching fund. And that fund has to come from the city or fundraising combined. That for the skate park, it was from capital. We didn't have CPC at the time.
Mhm.
So the funding match can come from capital and CPC or all CPC or all capital. But I have zero funding for capital and I have not applied for a park grant for this because I have to finish the feasibility study.
So if we were to give you some money, like, do you think, so you would then go for a park grant to like get matching funds and double whatever we gave you?
So whereas it's a 70-30 match, so yeah, we would have to have 70% of, say, 600,000.
And then they'll give you 30%.
It's a competitive grant, like, I am very proud that I'm 2 for 2, but I don't know if I'll always be 100%. That's what I shoot for.
But her question, they would provide the 30% and the city or somebody.
Donna, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened with the skate park is we had money sitting in the Friends of Greenfield Recreation account that had been fundraised and donated, and it sat there for years while we managed to get the money through capital and the park grant. My concern with this one is if we were to fund anything, it wouldn't be enough to really do anything. I mean, that's why we were at a happy medium with the feasibility study last year. And if we were to put it aside, I don't feel confident that we would, within 2 years, be able to break ground on something. So I feel like those other pieces, especially, the fundraising piece and starting to develop, a fund of money, a pool of money that can sit somewhere and be referred to as match is the first step. It's my comment.
I would like to recommend that they come back next year, but I don't feel like they're ready for what we require, what Park requires. I mean, it just seems to me that it's not, putting money aside and then having it just sit there. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think especially, for a park grant, if they would need 70%, I mean, we couldn't even give 50%. Like, CPA couldn't even provide 50%. So, I mean, I know then, try to make it up through other means too, but yeah, I do think it's
And didn't it seem like, am I correctly remembering that like the city money, they suggested that about the fundraising, that they would like to see something happen with the fundraising. So,
Oh, you mean the capital?
yeah.
Capital.
So do you think that there would even be a possibility that capital would even put some money in the future if they could see a growing pot of money that was?
I mean, it's hard for us to speak for them.
That's right,
It's
that's right.
entirely possible.
Yeah, so a lot of things.
But
could
it
possibly
might not
change.
happen too. I mean,
Yeah,
I think capital would need to see a growing constituency of people
yeah.
asking for it.
I think they're kind of in the same situation we are, a little bit.
Yeah.
Right,
Which is why we're trying to get off of the same schedule as.
Yeah.
right.
So.
Can we act on Garth's motion?
Do you want to make the motion
Yeah, I think a motion to
to deny?
deny funding on the pickleball project.
In it then.
Yeah, no one has seconded that motion. Okay, we have a second by Susan. Any other discussion? Okay, we will vote on the motion to deny funding for this year for pickleball. Susan,
Yes.
Whiskey,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David? Yes. Amy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right.
In communications with them, Christian, can we make it clear that we would like them to come back next year?
If there is a next year. That's,
I'll be there next year, next time.
All right, is there another project that would be easier to tackle, or do we want to?
You want to go back to your slide?
It's getting difficult now.
right.
I mean,
There's a lot of 3, 4, 5.
Historic seems like probably the easiest lift, right? Just go through this project.
If it's helpful.
Right.
Pull up the,
Yeah,
right?
this was
Yeah.
the story of
Yeah.
it. So Habitat for Humanity, bike racks, those two we already voted on. There's the housing, Franklin Community Co-op's off.
Right.
So housing, the Main Street housing, feasibility, Hillside Park, and then trail signage were the next. For the Oxbow housing, we had rated higher than the public did. Yeah, I guess my thought with, putting together that, like looking at the percentages from last year, 30% went to housing, 14% went to historic, 56 went to recreation. I know last year there were a lot more, even more recreation projects, to fund. And we fully funded the housing project that was there and, historic projects, but it makes me want to maybe fund more of the housing and historic this year than recreation. Like, do want to fund recreation, we are funding recreation projects too, but just so that like every year it's not, you know, one category gets most of the money, especially if in our plan and on all the public comments, everyone says like housing is most important. I feel like we should be recommending more funding for housing projects, so.
Oh, then should we do greater?
My philosophy in approaching this was looking at that last slide.
Yeah.
Was, you know, when I was doing my suggested allocations, which was to fully fund the ones that were at the top in all three columns in general, and not fund the ones at the bottom of the chart in all three columns.
I see.
And that was my rationale, because I think it's more impactful to fully fund things. So,
Yeah.
I guess I just wanted to put that out there as the approach that I was taking, that I think is sensible. And because there's kind of a pretty good mapping of what's at the top of the three columns and what's at the bottom, that was a good guide. And then after that, I kind of tweaked around with, you know, making sure there's 10%, 10%, but that was the late deletion of the co-op's application, kind of
Yeah.
had to scramble.
Yeah, I haven't done any editing yet of what I would do, but
But I mean, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Amy, but I think, yeah, I mean, I think we could look at the fives that are on the other spreadsheet.
so going down that list, we already
Under,
we've got
Under the graders.
The 10
seems like
grader.
Greater and the Hillside Park would be the next ones to look at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think at our last meeting, we sort of we were discussing the, I guess this already made it into the conditions that, the draft conditions that you have, that we would not require the funds to wait until construction, right? Like they would.
Correct,
be
yeah,
Available for.
They can be used for pre-development work.
Pre-development,
There's no longer any condition around the timing of the construction.
And so the only risk with that is that it could end up not getting built, but that's also.
It's like a feasibility study
It is.
for a housing thing,
Yeah.
right? So we're saying like, we're interested in exploring this, it seems like a good thing or not, but.
I'm fine with the idea of things in pre-development or feasibility study. It might not be feasible.
We'll find out.
Fail, you know, I think we're addressing these needs, so, you know, taking that kind of a risk, I think, even with the public's money, I think it's completely appropriate.
And I mean, I will, the public's money, and also a lot of the public who wrote comments said that housing was their number one priority, so. Yeah, I mean, I would be fine fully funding that one for 50,000 if other people are comfortable. Yeah, go ahead.
I move that the hillside housing, the downtown housing project be funded for $26,450 from the housing fund. The total would be 50,000, and the rest of it would come from flexible funding.
We already did a bit from the housing reserve.
Oh, we did, it's.
There's 11,000
So it's 15,000, so $11,450 would be done from the housing fund, and the rest of it, the rest of the 50,000 would be done from the flexible fund.
Second.
And so we have a motion that was seconded. I guess we need those conditions read as well, once he gets the numbers in there.
$3,855, $3,855.
Thank you, Christian, for all of your hard work on the computer over there.
CPA funds are to be used for the support of community housing via pre-development activities that work toward creating affordable housing up to 100% of the area median income. the grantee agrees to execute and record an affordable housing restriction prior to renting any of the units for this project. And the grantee also agrees to follow other conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act grant agreement.
So is there any other discussion on that motion with those conditions applied? Okay. Hearing no other discussion, we will vote on that motion. Susan,
Yes.
Wisp,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
I am also a yes, so that is unanimous. Okay. So the next one that was on that list, if we're going down the list the way you suggested, was Hillside Park. And I guess that one, I wasn't sure if we wanted to do any other ones that were smaller amounts to try and figure out what would work with Hillside or not, because it seemed like we mostly agreed that the shade should at least be funded, but then maybe there was some disagreement about the trail or the walking path extension. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about. Yeah,
I think we should just fully fund it.
I agree.
Instead of, piecemealing out, this is what the recreation department, has put forward. We've heard from several times. We've heard about the kind of community it serves, which was kind of our emphasis in our rubric about underserved communities. And so instead of kind of backseat driving for the applicant, I would say just my opinion would be fully fund this and maybe not fund some others for recreation at all.
anyone have any dissenting thoughts on that? Does anyone want to make a motion or go ahead,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
guess my, this is the second year for the trail wayfinding.
Yeah.
And, when I was doing this, I just want to throw this out and looking at the whole, that the signage and installation of, ad for the trail wayfinding would be something, it is a partial fund, but it would be something that could be done and completed in such a way that it would be useful to the community, it would be useful to people that are visiting here. And so I just want to put that into the mix here. And I don't know how that would fit with fully funding the hillside improvements. But if the number that I had on it was $34,000, which would
On Hillside or on?
on
Wayfinding?
the trail wayfinding.
And there would still be money available.
So I
It
think
would be
that-
like what we'd taking it from,
Right,
right? Obviously, not everybody's getting.
right. So that's just something I would like to put in there. The side amenities were there too, but I feel less strongly about that than the trail wayfinding.
I mean, it feels like we did site amenities last year as well.
Yes.
And some of those are in process.
Mhm.
Sort of to Dave's point on the pickleball thing, like the trail wayfinding is in process, right? They're doing for Congressman is doing the mapping,
Yeah, they're doing mapping right now.
right? I mean, I use those trails a lot. And I talked to Joy when she first brought it forward. And I realized like fancy plastic signs are more expensive these days. And it's just baffling to me that we couldn't put up little wooden signs that seem to work for all of DCR and the Appalachian Trail and, national parks. That somehow we need these like Cadillac indestructible signage on there. Like, I don't know, there's a active group. Somebody probably even owns a router, right?
I will say, I've tried to get this done on conservation land and it hasn't happened yet, unfortunately.
Right, I just feel like I could make a PDF and, print out 400 sign pages and have someone some board person with a router make some trail signs for less than $135,000.
See, I think the designs are, I mean, that's the standard. I mean, it has all sorts of things that are about accessibility, durability, the cost of doing it right one time is less than doing it a zillion times with little wooden signs that disintegrate. So, I mean, but it wasn't the priority on our rubric. It wasn't a priority for the survey. It wasn't a priority for the comments. It wasn't a priority for any public comments in any meeting. But the Hillside Park was.
It did come right after Hillside Park, but I will say the reason I think we should fully fund Hillside Park, maybe at the expense of the signage, is just because it's like in an environmental justice area and Hillside Park is in like, I don't know, more wealthy neighborhood. Not that the entire city doesn't use it, because I mean, people all over the city do use it, but.
Right, what I'm looking at is, I don't have any problem with fully funding the Hillside project. It's more like, can we do a partial funding of the trail wayfinding as part of plan? That's what when we start talking, doing this
Once we
whole.
get a little further
Yeah,
on.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking at.
Well, yeah, and I'll fess up to, I'm gonna push for trail wayfinding funding, maybe not complete. But I would agree with the Hillside to just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then to see how things shake down, because when I look at how I wanted to put in at least 50,000 on the trailway already. And there's that, anyway,
Donna.
there's a
had
lot
her
to
hand
mess
up.
around.
Motion to fully fund Hillside Park project.
There you
Well,
go.
can I say something first? In our second year of CPC, I just love the idea of us funding something and then we put the sign up and Hillside Park looks great. I mean, we're partially funding all this stuff and
Yeah,
it just, I don't know. A little scattershot. But I'll second your motion, Donna.
Okay. Do we, so I guess, we need to specify that which category that's coming from?
It's up. Wait, there is no.
There's
22,
just flex.
550,
Oh, no, there's 22
Right,
left in
22,
recreation.
22, 550.
Oh, yeah, 550. Okay, should Donna make the motion again with that, Christine, in your opinion?
Yeah.
I motion that we fund Hillside Park with $22,550 from the recreation line and $102,450 from the flexible line.
Okay.
And there's the simple condition.
Yeah, Donna, I guess if you could just read that condition too.
And that the recreation department agrees to follow conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act Memorandum of Agreement.
Okay, so that was just clarifying the motion. We had a second. Any other discussion? Before voting on it? Okay, so we will vote on that motion to fund the Hillside Park project. Susan,
Yes.
Wisty,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes.
I mean, when a butter comes to say yes to all the noise and construction,
Of all the people.
I think that gets.
I have many slits, I should all my windows. But I would have been happy with just shading.
All those meddling kids. So now,
I love the parking lot.
So now we have 26,450 in historic left, 79,650 in the flexible, for a total of 106,100. And we haven't done any historic projects yet. Christian, do you think you could go back to the presentation just to see what the ranking was on that?
The top historic would have been the co-op that is withdrawn, so the top historic after that is the garden. And then the city clerk, and then greater, depending on what one you're looking at, but for the general survey, that's the order there.
Yeah.
My thought is considering that the Franklin County Community Co-op is not in play, fully funding the garden block.
Yeah, when I was doing the scoring, I mean, my thought was like the Garden Theater and the Wilson's Building are like two of like the downtown Greenfield historic buildings that you think of, you know? So it seemed if there was going to be like historic restoration on the building, like those two. And we did get public comments about the garden and how, you know, it's important because of, it's like the arts and, you know, it's important to.
That was number 5, and
Yeah.
the verbal.
Yeah, and the comments that people left, it was a lot more positive in the comments than in the survey. So was that a motion or?
Do you want to read?
I will now.
Do you want me to, let's,
Yeah, yeah,
I'll give you
yeah,
numbers
do
up
the
front.
numbers for me.
2, 6, 1.
And then you can pull up the conditions and you can
Yeah.
make the conditions once we get.
I move to recommend that $26,450 from the historic reserve and $8,350 from the undesignated fund for a total of $34,000 for the.
34,000.
I'm sorry, 37,800 for the garden block project. On the condition that the grantee agrees to execute and record a preservation restriction on the property located at 361 Main Street within 6 months of project completion, that the grantee agrees to execute the project complying with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, and that CPA funds are only to be used for rehabilitation, restoration of the historic exterior and facade of the building located at 361 Main Street. And in addition, that the grantee agrees to follow all other conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act grant agreement.
Second. Okay, so we have
Dave, second.
a long motion that was seconded. So any discussion on that? I did, oh gosh, what was I gonna say? Oh, I guess I just wanted to clarify when Christian was sending emails to everyone, I was copied on these emails, so I saw like what people were saying. And I guess I just wanted to clarify among us, when we're asking for a preservation restriction, we're asking for a restriction on the work that's being done.
Correct.
And not like the entire building has to be 100% historic preservation. Just wanted to clarify that.
Tear it all to
I think-
pieces and make it one big playhouse.
Well, I think that would, you know, it adds more of a, I think technically you could do that, but it would add, you know, more of a burden to
Right.
it. And that would be something that the city works out when they're, you know, doing all that. But I just wanted to clarify what our intentions were with our historic preservation.
It's just related to the work.
Yeah, I just wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, as we saw at the last meeting, there's a few different templates from different towns, some that are like full-blown for full preservation restrictions, other ones which are just restrictions, like you're saying, on specific parts of the building, different varying amounts of years. So that can be sorted out. All that really matters is there is a restriction in your conditions.
And the garden blocks already on the official,
It's on the
like,
state register.
state registry.
It's there via the Downhouse Historic District, and then I believe it's also there as an individual before the historic district was created, so it's kind of double on there.
and the historical commission sent a letter of support or voted their support for
Mhm.
the grant application.
Great.
Right, any other? Oh, sorry, Donna. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't lower my hand earlier.
Oh, okay. Any other discussion before we vote on that motion? Okay, not hearing any other discussion. We'll vote on that motion then. Susan,
Yes.
Wisty.
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. So it's unanimous as well. Okay, so there's 71,300 left in the flexible fund. And so at the bottom there, I was just looking at the percentages. So that's last year plus this year, right? 49% recreation.
Yeah, it's approximate, but
Approximate.
that's pretty much how close you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is another housing project on there. And that's the next one that had the most people who said that they would fund it. So, so yeah, I know 170,000, there isn't even 170,000 left. So that would have to be a partial funding.
But the other history one also got a 5.
Oh, for
That one's crossed out. The city clerk one got 4, so that one was,
Right,
that's the
clerk.
next closest one. So the city clerk one, I know that one, they said it wasn't gonna be able to fully fund everything they wanted to do anyway, and they would need more funding in the future. So in my rankings, I put partial funding for that, because I figured then they could get started on it.
Yeah, that's it.
And I also did partial for the other housing project too, because I knew we didn't have 170,000 to provide for that project. So I don't know, with that money left, I guess what I'm asking are those two projects that if we only funded 2 more projects or only one, would those 2 be among the top 2 for everyone? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna go back to the wayfinding question. I know that there is still,
Mhm.
I mean, the recreation is a lot of right now what we have in the budget. But if we did, just trying to do my math here, if we did, what I have is $34,000 for the wayfinding. And it's
That's about half of what's
yeah,
left.
yeah. Yeah, so it may be more than we need to do. I'm just trying to figure out a way, because I believe that city clerks should get some money. And I'm trying to figure out how we do that and how we give Oxbow a reasonable amount of money. So, yeah, no. So,
Go ahead, Misty.
I want to say something about the Oxbow. I'm with a group of people who have started meeting in my neighborhood, and it includes people on Prospect Avenue, Hope Street, and also Interest. Hope Street has been neglected. Hope Street is a very sad situation.
It's not hope.
Yeah.
No.
And Oxbow, that's where it wants to build. So I'm just putting out, if there's something new and something sharp and something, I just want to put that out.
Yeah, and I guess, also with the Oxbow, going back to when we were first talking about this project, that one was also a project that was gonna be like the highest cost per unit for housing of like any housing project that's been before us, so.
Yeah.
Just because there is a housing project doesn't mean we have to fund it
Right.
if we think it's not a good fit or whatever.
let me just say that right now, I know, Alyssa's not here, but she can tell you there's a house on Cleveland Street that they are rehabbing. They are not even starting from scratch on this. They're rehabbing, and it's costing over $500,000 to deal with everything they have to deal with in terms of, in terms of asbestos removal and and other things like that, and lead removal, as well as dealing with building, and it's not gonna be a fancy house when they're done. So I think that it used to, several years ago, someone said to me that the average was about $350,000 a unit. I think the average now cost, considering increases because of COVID and stuff, is closer to the $450,000, $500,000 a unit. So they're not, it's not outrageous, I guess is what I'm saying, in terms of $2 million, $7 million.
So I have a question for Christie, actually, which is with the trail wayfinding, you know, if 20,000 or 30,000 or whatever was provided this year in CPA funding, would anything be able to get started with that? Or would it just be like waiting until more funding comes in before anything could get started?
Well, we certainly could probably nail down like the design and that kind of stuff of, the wayfinding signs. I can tell you that, Ryan Furcock, who's doing all the mapping right now, he just, like, he showed me like a recent, his GPS markings, like there are so many trails there. And we have to figure out which ones we really should be using and which ones that people have just made because they get lost. And then figure out like that my number, the 135 may change, you know, I can't tell you exactly.
Do you have a router?
You know, I do, I have two actually. I'm not
All
going to.
tools.
So it will certainly help, and if I get 20,000 from you guys, and then I can certainly go back to city council and say, hey, CPC has given us 20,000, and you come up with the rest, you know, like.
I mean, even if it were just to get the markers done and get them put into the ground and all of that, coming to the city council for $14,000 or something like that would be a lot easier for you to do, I think. Okay.
Did you say 14,000?
14, for the total cost of signage and installation, according to the proposal, was 34,000.
135,000.
No, I'm talking about not the kiosks,
Oh.
just the signs and the installation of the signs,
I see.
not doing the kiosks.
I see.
Was 34,000 according to the numbers that I came up with through it. So that's what I was looking, when I was talking about this earlier, I was not talking about the kiosks at all. I was just talking about getting some signs in so people could know where they were going and having that information available to people.
Can you tell me what number I just got to the right?
I got 34,000. It was signage and installation as opposed to the kiosks.
So the trail placard posts are 24. Not sure where you're getting your.
Okay, I may have
You can pull up the.
stuff.
This
I don't
is
know.
kind of what I object to about this partial funding thing. We're only
Yeah.
doing this because, we have the rec department here. We don't have everybody, the other applicants here. So it's kind of that backseat driving thing for the grantees.
Well, I would be
Mhm.
speaking for this, whether or not Kristen was here. I'm not somebody
That
who
sounds like
uses that frequently, and I get lost up there. And I don't, and I've gone hiking in other places that I've counted on signage. And it gives me all kinds of freedom to do exploring. And without signage, I don't have that freedom.
Mhm.
So this isn't, Christie can go away, and I will still say.
Mhm.
Sorry, I misread this or added. So the trail placard posts are 24,000 and the signage is 30,000. So it's a total of 54,000. So it's more than I think I wrote down my chicken scratches. 54, but it looked like.
Well, the installation of kiosk and signage, anyway. Right, so if you're just talking about trail placards, presumably the 20,000 is not the full 20,000.
Yeah, I mean,
So some portion of, maybe you just said like well, maybe half of that goes to the placards, half of it
Yeah,
goes to the
that
kiosks.
may have been what I did. Yep.
You know, who knows if
Yeah. Who knows?
that's what it actually comes out as, you know, I guess,
Okay.
assuming these are all estimates anyway.
Mhm.
All right. Just looking at the numbers. So, yeah, I mean, David, I understand the like, your strategy of like fully funding things. I think at this point, the only one that could be fully funded was the Main Street cornice. You think we should? Because I think that one was like, can you go to the rating?
Very low.
I love it. And I guess my concern with funding that one is when he was here, he said it was gonna happen whether we fund it or not. So, I mean, the good that we would get out of it is like a historic preservation restriction on it. But it's probably not gonna change much in the next 30 years anyway. So I don't know. That's why for me personally, I thought, you know, like with the document binding one, that was one where it was like a certain cost per book.
Right.
And so if they got 20,000 now, they could at least get started on some books until they get more funding.
Well, here's why I wanted to not have a discussion in public, you know, with all due respect to the city clerk and the work that they put into the application and everything. And I'm sure there are some sort of, you know, crazy requirements from the state and everything. It just didn't make sense to me that it could possibly cost that much to rebind books. A, and B, you're rebinding books that they say that the public can't access. So that too made no sense to me because of the kind of personal information that's inside of these things. You know, a much more rational thing would be to, you know, stabilize the documents by putting them just in archival boxes, scanning them so that if somebody did need access, you could provide them with a digital scan and keep the books as, you know, a ground truth of that. So I would not support funding this. I think doing something about scanning these documents, getting a good inventory of them, all that stuff is great. And making sure that it meets the conditions of the state or whatever. But to me, it was just not, it just didn't seem like something that I could support.
And I will say there were multiple public comments about this should be scanned instead. And then there was an email that came from it's like a historian or something.
Yeah, he's a
Um,
former librarian, I think.
Former librarian, historical librarian or something, and he was like, these really should be scanned like while you're doing this. And so that was another side of my thinking was like, maybe the project should change if it gets funded, but also if they're not gonna change it, maybe get started. So you're more the expert on historical.
I would love to invite them to come back, you know, in a subsequent year, and I would love to try and volunteer to help them think it through, if that's something that they would be interested in, but, or even in the historical commission too.
Yeah.
So I just think that the need is real, but I don't think this is the right.
Right, the project as presented does not seem to go for what we maybe really want.
Yeah.
As an outcome.
There could be some that, you know, I don't know about all these regulations, so there could be something in the requirements that they're operating under that actually makes this the only way to go, but it didn't. It does.
According to finding your roots, it's all got to be on, you know, fancy machine.
I'd like to make a motion that the city clerk works with the historical commission to come up with the most effective way to deal with these documents. And that they come back to our next funding process with with the agreed upon best way to deal with this.
So that sounds like a motion to deny funding.
That's a motion to deny funding, but with that information.
I'll second that. Okay. All right. Any other discussion on asking them to work with the historical commission and come back next year and not fund this year? Okay, I'm not seeing any discussion. So let me go down my list here. Susan,
Yes.
Wisty,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Okay.
You want me to pull up that comment for you, Travis?
Um. I didn't see that we did have, him here. So, we could ask him the question.
I am actually am here.
Yeah, I see that you are here now. I guess, the question to you is that Cornice project going to happen, whether it gets the CPA funding or not?
You know, I think that was another group that said they weren't going to move forward. They would move forward without your funding. I don't have a timeline that I know that Cornice work will be done without any grant funding.
Okay,
In terms of deterioration in relation to weather and stuff, what is the status of the Cornice at this point?
So we have been working on restoring the brickwork, but the cornice has it is mostly steel that is starting to rust. But you have to climb up on the roof and look over the edge, so we don't get up there a lot to give a lot of attention to look very closely at it. But it is steel that is not currently painted, so it is going to continue to deteriorate.
Thank you.
so we're kind of in the weeds right now.
So we have up to 71,000.
I-
We do not actually have to spend everything.
No, we don't have-
Well, we
We
can,
could end right, we could deny all the rest of it if we wanted to.
Right.
I guess I wanted to make a motion to deny funding to the site amenities project for this year.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? And I guess I would just say, just because we've been talking about all the other projects, so it seems obvious that one's kind of on the bottom. And it also rated lower with the public feedback.
maybe
Not lower
maybe they'll be
than-
more excited once
The
they,
ones that are left.
once they see the first wave of them come out and be like, oh,
Yeah.
that'd be awesome. Maybe we can get a chess thing in our, or,
Yeah,
Right.
whatever the beanbag toss in our neighborhood too.
okay. Any other discussion on that before we vote? Okay,
Susan, do you second that?
yeah, Susan seconded, yeah. So the motion to deny funding for site amenities for this year, Susan,
Yes.
Christie.
Yes.
Donna,
yes,
Garth,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. So that's unanimous. Just thought it'd be easier if we were down to at least three.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So right now, we have 100 and.
So what actually was the answer on the Cornice?
There's no clear path if they do not get
Okay.
grant.
Two. Abashan and 4 cans of Rust-Oleum like is the current plan.
I think we were primarily funding, it would be funding the, like the structure to actually get up there to do.
Right, this
Scaffolding.
scaffolding and lift.
Yeah,
It's a difficult place to work.
yeah. So anyone have,
the motion that we fully fund the 278 main forms?
there a second?
Second.
Right.
Money, the 20,000 out of.
Oh, yeah, we need,
Alternatively, we could fund half of it.
you should probably read the motion. There's a sheet of paper in front of you.
Oh, Lord.
And it would be from
That's
the
from undesignated.
undesignated, yeah.
I move to recommend $20,000 from the undesignated fund for the 278 Main Hornets application on the condition that the grantee agrees to execute and record a preservation restriction on the property located at 278 Main Street within 6 months of project completion. Grantee agrees to execute the project complying with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. PPA funds are only to be used for rehabilitation and restoration of the historic exterior and facade of the building located at 278 Main Street. Grantee agrees to follow other conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act grant agreement.
So that was clarifying the motion and Susan had seconded that.
Second.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion on that one before we vote on it? Okay, so we will vote on that motion. Susan,
Yes.
Misty,
Yes.
Donna,
No,
Garth,
No,
David,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So that motion passes.
Right, you're writing down the split on that one, Garth, those two no's, right?
yep.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's $51,300 left. I guess the question is, now it's either, do we want to? I feel like it's either, do we provide $51,300 to the housing or the wayfinding is kind of how I feel like it's coming
Yeah.
down to. I mean, if you go any less than that, is it gonna be as impactful, you know, like
Yeah.
fully funding things?
You're pretty
Funding things.
even in the thing, except that I think didn't in the SPO housing. Yeah, I mean,
The signage got sixes all the way across. We rated the housing higher than the public did. Because, I think because of the bonus points probably, because it was for, you know, affordable housing. And so that gets the bonus points on our scoring.
I like the idea of funding the signage, because it was what, $24,000 where we could just start towards the placards.
Well, I guess that's if you want to ask Christie, maybe if that would even be possible. It sounded like it might be like waiting to get more before actually like doing all of it. I'm not sure. Christie, I guess that's a question to you.
So you're asking if I'm gonna go buy placards for with 24,000? So we're.
I think if 24,000 was provided, would placards be bought and
Yeah, what do we
installed?
get? What do we get for 24,000?
I wouldn't be buying anything until we, with the commission, nail down exactly what we're putting on all these, trail signs and markers. Like distance, like what is allowed on the trails? Is it just for hiking? Is it hiking and mountain biking? Are we, labeling the trails like the ski, codes, you know, like blue, black, and what's the other color for skiing? Red, for easy, you know, difficult, moderate. But what I do like about getting some money from you is that I can say, look at, I had to the city and the mayor and city council that I have X amount of dollars from CPC. This is what our budget is based on comparative research. Can you come up with the rest so that we can move this project? None of my projects ever get fully funded, except for Hillside. I think it's the first time ever I've had funding to complete a project. It's always.
So what are we getting?
Different.
Gonna get like a placard or? We get these.
There'll be a sign up that is funded by CPC.
But if we, let's say gave $24,000, that would be sufficient to cover at least some signage. You may have trails that you may not be able to do right away, but there would be at least some signage that would come out of that. Can you say that or not?
Again, as I said, like, I think I need to look at the whole project, I think what, I think David has had some reservations on this, because like, we estimated the 24,000 based on just standard trail markers. But depending on what we end up saying needs to be on there, that the trail markers may cost more than that, you know what I mean? Like, if we're gonna have all those different things.
I guess what I'm asking is if you have standard trail markers, you can do 50. And if you have other kinds of markers, you can do 30. But we would end up with trail markers is I guess the question that I'm asking is for some level.
Can I just clarify, are you asking if CPA funding was provided up to 50,000 or 20 or whatever,
Right,
would any work occur
Occur.
before getting any other funding? I
right.
think that's
So
the question.
if we only got whatever we give you, would there be possibilities for some work happening, I guess? Or is it a useless?
Is it better to wait until?
Right, better
more-
to wait. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Right. Well, I guess I never want to delay funding because I don't know if I'm ever gonna get it again, to be honest.
Right,
But I can't tell you right now tonight that I'm gonna be buying X number of placards, or if I'm buying 4x4 posts to put those placards on.
Right.
Because I need to figure out exactly with the rec commission where each of these
Right.
placards are gonna be. So that. I just-
Thanks. I understand the difficulty of the question we're asking. Thank you.
I appreciate the support.
So I'm wondering, do people want to give funding to one project or the other, or split it in half? What's
Or
the
neither.
general, or neither, yeah, it could be neither. Anyone?
Contradicting myself, I think, with these amounts, and I guess if I were doing it on my own, I would split this remaining amount. I think we need to give some to Oxbow because of its, rating by everybody, and because of our emphasis on housing. I think that even the $170,000 in the scope of their project is not that much, so fully funding a fraction, it's a fraction. And it's gonna be the same with the trail wayfinding, so I would divide by 2.
Christian, can you just put those numbers in, just to look at the percentages at the bottom there? You get a space before your comma there. Or it didn't like the comma. So if we did that, as you're saying, then overall for last year plus this year, recreation would get 53.8% approximately. Housing 30% and historic 16% in the end. Over those 2 years.
And if we look at it in numbers, what we've got is a remarkable amount of consistency
From year to year.
from year to year.
Yeah. Yeah, basically the same as last year, the breakdown.
Right.
Make a motion?
Yeah, I think we'd have to do them individually, using the template. Does this generally feel good to people?
Sure.
I mean, with the understanding too, that what we're just giving this money toward like the trail wayfinding. There's no way to tie it to this piece or that piece. It's just toward the effort, right?
I mean, technically, we probably could, but I think it would be better for the recreation department to make
Right.
it more.
No contingency. There must be at
Yeah.
least 10
Right.
trail signs.
For that project.
Right.
sort of.
Yeah.
Well, I like it.
Susan,
I move to recommend $26,500.
Oh,
Is
wait,
that?
it was,
That was
just make sure.
$26,650 from the undesignated fund for the Oxbow Design Build co-op project. On the condition that The CPA funds are used for the creation of affordable housing up to 100% of the area median income, that no disbursement of funds may occur until the project has received all necessary permitting and approvals, that the disbursement of funds will begin only after construction has begun. Construction of the project must begin within 2 years of the grant award approval by the city council, and the grantee agrees to execute and record an affordable housing restriction on the project located at 187 Hope Street. And the grantee also agrees to follow other conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act grant agreement.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any other discussion? I guess I just want to add, I think the good thing about putting any sort of money on it is that we do require the affordable restriction, where I know that that was their plan anyway, but that like guarantees, like, if you take this money, that is going to happen. So that's one good thing about the buy-in of, CPA funding. I just want to throw that in there.
Hopefully it has a rhetorical value for them trying to raise other funds.
Yeah, and that's another thing identified in our plan, is that we want CPA funding to be helpful as like seed money for people to get grants, to get other money. So hopefully that can assist with that as well. Any other discussion before we vote on that motion? Okay, hearing none, we will vote on that motion. Susan,
Yes.
Christie.
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. So that's unanimous.
And then I move that we fund the hardworking recreation department's trailway funding in the amount of $25,650 from, what is that?
Undesignated.
Undesignated funds. On the condition that the grantee agrees to follow conditions as deemed necessary and defined within the Community Preservation Act Memorandum of Agreement.
I'll second that. I haven't gotten a second one yet. All right. Any other discussion on the trailway finding? Okay, hearing none, we will vote on the motion for 25,650 for trail wayfinding. Susan,
Yes.
Christie. Yes. Donna,
yes,
Garth,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
And I am also a yes. So that is unanimous, and that's the end of our
Did
recommendations.
25 to 50 on?
Yeah.
I
50 on
had
those.
26,600.
Oh.
650. Okay. Let's make sure.
Okay, so the next step is this will go to city council, or you'll put it together in some fancy thing.
Yeah, pull up the chart. So right now you just finished the green box. You
Practically there. Done and done.
you voted to recommend funding. Community Development Department, which is me, I'm gonna send it over to the mayor and the finance department. They're obligated to send it on to city council. City council will have a hearing on it at the Ways and Means Committee and at the city council. Ways and Means will make a recommendation. City council will vote on the supplementary budget requests, what they're called, and it only needs a simple majority. They can decrease the amounts, but they cannot increase them, and they cannot fund any projects that you did not recommend to fund. And then from there, the ones that are approved are sent back to the mayor to sign appropriation. The mayor may not veto it. And then the mayor will send notification on to finance and to me, and I will begin work on getting the agreement signed by the applicants.
Okay.
That's a nice
David?
Should we go to that Ways and Means thing if they have questions?
Yeah, so last year I volunteered to talk at the Ways and Means and at City Council, and they didn't feel it was necessary, but I'll offer again on our behalf if everyone's okay with that.
Yes.
So it's surprisingly uncontentious.
Yeah, I think in general across the state, most of what gets recommended to like city council just gets funded. You know, it just gets approved. But that's their responsibility to, you know, make that decision.
Right, if someone hears about, I can't believe you're giving money to this.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all of a sudden, they're-
If after our meeting, there's a huge public outcry against one of these projects in city council, you know, vote to not fund.
It's the trail funding.
Would you mind just scrolling over to the right for a minute, just to satisfy me curiosity?
Oh, just the full.
You didn't see everyone's numbers.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, we changed a lot.
No, I was just interested to. Thank you.
Deliberated.
We did deliberate. So on our agenda, now we have old business timeline for CPA cycle going forward. Did you hear from?
So my department head, Amy, was supposed to have her regularly scheduled meeting with the mayor today and was supposed to talk about that. I did not have a chance to catch up with her afterwards.
Okay.
So something we'll essentially discuss in April or whenever that kind of decision around when the capital timeline is finalized.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to change our process if that might be changing
Yeah.
as well. So I don't think we should do anything at this time. Everyone's okay with that?
yeah.
Okay. Do we have any CPA project updates to go over?
I don't believe so, not since last week, so.
Okay. All right, so then our next meeting is April 25th at 5:30 PM. Here, City Hall meeting room. Yeah, and also via Zoom, if anyone wants to join via Zoom. And if anyone on the committee has anything that they feel like we should discuss, feel free to email me or feel free to email Christian and
April 28th.
should be the
It's a
fourth
Monday. Oh, no,
Thursday. Yeah,
I moved that we adjourn this meeting.
okay. Motion to adjourn,
Second?
seconded. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right,
You want the keys back
we
for?
are adjourned at 7:14 PM.